Presidential candidates have been hard on the campaign trail trying to drum up support from voters, but one candidate is taking the lead when it comes to financial donations. Former President Donald Trump's campaign just released second quarter numbers showing he raised $35 million between April and June, nearly double what his campaign reported it raised in the first quarter. We should point out, though, that is a combined campaign and super PAC haul, not just his official campaign. CBS News political reporter Zak Hudak has more on this and the latest developments from the GOP field. Help us put the $35 million into context, Zach. How does it compare to other candidates? Do we know yet the division between his campaign and the super PAC, which can raise and spend in a slightly less regulated way? And do we know how it compares to the last time he ran for office?
Ed, we do not know how it compares to other candidates yet, although we can imagine, based on previous elections, that it is likely more than others have raised this quarter. What we do know is that it's more than twice as much as his campaign raised in the first quarter of the year. So that's particularly interesting because since that first quarter, we've had a number of legal problems for the former president. It indicates that there is a chance here, it seems, that the indictments against him are actually mobilizing his donor base. And that's reinforced by the fact that the average donor in this haul was $34. So these are a lot of relatively small online donations coming in. Now, if we look back at 2019, in that election, the former president, then president, was combining his campaign funds with the RNC's funds. That's an advantage you get as the incumbent. Yeah. So between the two, they had about $100 million in quarter two. But given that this is a different situation, I would say he's on a somewhat similar track to that, if anything, a little bit behind. But you make a good point about the super PAC. That money is going in large part to his legal defense funds. Right. So there is a decent chunk of this, and we don't know the exact breakdown. But if you look at the fine print in some of the donor forms, it's probably about 10% that's going to the super PAC that is not going to the re-election campaign and is in fact going to deal with these legal problems that are fueling some of the donations. And
one wonders how many of the donors realize that that money is actually going to his legal fund and not to actually getting him reelected
Are the super PACs required to disclose how they're spending the money?
Incredibly fine print, right, Zach? I mean, it's usually pretty subtle and something either assumed or that the donor finds out about later. Yeah.
That is so fascinating. Well, speaking of super PACs, a Pence-backing super PAC just launched an ad campaign today criticizing the former President Trump for his praising of Putin and Kim Jong-un. Now, this is a super PAC. It's not the actual sort of campaign of the former vice president. But I'm assuming that these super PACs are in line with the vision of the campaign, or else they wouldn't move forward. What is this telling you? It seems as if, you know, the Pence camp is more comfortable tiptoeing into open criticism of Donald Trump.
I think that's definitely right, and they have been moving more and more in that direction of being more direct with their criticism. They have to be careful when they do that, though, because a lot of Mike Pence's biggest accomplishments are directly connected to Donald Trump's biggest accomplishments. For instance, on the repeal of Roe, that's something that happened as a result of their administration. That puts Mike Pence in a situation where he has to find ways to differentiate himself while taking credit for some of the things the former president did, but say they weren't quite enough. So this is an instance where he's looking at something that he was removed enough from in that administration and pulling it out of the rest of the full picture of what that administration did and kind of nitpicking to find an attack that can attack that administration without attacking himself, even though he was in a prominent role in it.
Yeah, he's wrapped up in a bit of a pretzel. That's one way of putting it, at least. You know, one of the more fascinating characters to emerge from this campaign season so far is the wife of the Florida governor, Casey DeSantis, who's about to hit the road and go solo for a little bit on her husband's behalf. What can you tell us about her role as the campaign continues?
Her role is definitely larger than the typical spouse of someone who's running for president. She is in the room when a lot of major decisions are being made, and she has a prominent role. A lot of supporters of Ron DeSantis cite her as sort of a counterweight to some of his occasional awkward demeanor or aggressive demeanor. She is a former television personality and is very charismatic and has aspirations just as high as him. So it's very much a partnership the two of them have running for president here. And one thing I would point out is that there are some people who note that her ambition mixed with his ambition might be a recipe for disaster. The longtime Donald Trump ally, Roger Stone, recently compared her to Lady Macbeth, saying that he helped get her here, but he may be the undoing of her.
I haven't heard Roger Stone in a while.
No.
He's been quiet.
I would point out charisma is a qualifying feature of those of us in television.
It's true. It's true. I can't argue with that.
She definitely has that.
Smart man here.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, got to ask you about Miami's mayor, Francis Suarez, also running. So he's launched an AI chatbot that sort of allows people to ask questions, and then he, like sort of an avatar, as I understand it, of him, he responds. But he's not the only candidate using AI during this election.
He's not, and it's certainly a way that he's being creative, and I think we're going to see probably all of these candidates try to utilize it in different ways. But what stands out to me and what this has raised attention to is just how good deepfakes are getting, and the fact that the more likely situation we see playing out is not that they play a big role in official campaign propaganda, but they play a major role in actual disinformation. We saw that happen in the Chicago mayoral race earlier this year, where a Democratic candidate, there was a deepfake video put out showing what looked like him saying that he wanted to refund the police, something he never said, and it was put out on Twitter by a fake news organization. And a lot of experts said that even though that was eventually removed, the damage had been done, and obviously that candidate did not win the election.
Oh, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't even really consider that. I feel like we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the future. Zak Hudak, thank you very much.